So we're here to continue our product spotlight on MoTeC's brand new M150 plug-and-play ECU for the Toyota 86, Scion FRS and Subaru BRZ. Now if you haven't seen part 1 of our review, click the link here, and in that link we talk about all of the product features and go through what you get in the package when you purchase one of these ECUs. Now we're going to go through the whole system once we've had it installed in the car. We've had a chance to check it out, tune it on our dyno and experience the ECU in the real world for the last few weeks, and I'm going to tell you about those experiences. One of the first things you notice with the M150 package is just how well it works in a standard car. Basically, if you install the ECU, press the start button, the engine will start and run. Basically drives just like factory. You wouldn't even know it had an aftermarket ECU in it. All of the other factory functions such as air conditioning, power steer, traction control, etc. just work exactly like factory. So it's a really good starting point for a tune, and it is quite amazing how well it does everything. One of the functions that it does an exceptional job of is controlling the direct injector and port injector mix. We've got control over both the direct injection and port injection. There's a DI-PI split table, so you can set up the ratio of port injection to direct injection throughout the rev and load range. And it does a really good job of controlling those injectors, and you've got complete flexibility there. One of the main differences between the M150 and most other standalone engine management systems is the way the ECU controls the fuel delivery into the engine. So the M150 uses a proper fuel delivery model. So instead of tuning a millisecond based fuel table, we actually have a table of engine volumetric efficiency. This works in conjunction with some really accurate injector data so that the ECU knows what pulse width to deliver to the injectors to get the required amount of fuel, and also an AIM Lambda or AIM air fuel ratio mixture table. So when we're tuning the ECU, basically we're entering accurate and real volumetric efficiency numbers into the main VE table. We're telling the ECU how much air is entering the engine at all the different combinations of load and RPM. The advantage of a VE based fuel system is once we've tuned that VE table, we don't need to touch it again unless we make changes to the engine that affect its volumetric efficiency. If you want to change the air fuel ratio or lambda value that the engine is running at any point, all we need to do is change the AIM lambda number in the fuel AIM lambda table, and the ECU will make all the required changes and it just tracks perfectly. The other thing is, if we want to change injectors, all we do is fit the new injectors into the required injector data, and again everything just starts and runs like you've made no changes at all. So that's really powerful, and it really separates the M150 from most other aftermarket ECUs that are on the market at the moment. One of the features I really liked in the new M1 Tune software is the live data logging straight onto the tuning software. So this is really handy for being able to see exactly what's going on. You can use it on the road or on the dyno to instantly see what was happening during a run. Previously, we had to download the data out of the ECU and then analyze that in MoTeC's i2. Now we can do all of this from inside M1 Tune. It's really powerful. One of the most useful functions of this is the ability to really pinpoint where the ECU is accessing in any of the tables by clicking on a certain point in the data log. So that lets you really quickly narrow in your tune and get everything dialed in really fast and really accurately. One of the optional accessories which we added into our M150 install is MoTeC's LTC or Lambda to CAN module. Now the optional adapter loom that we got with our kit has a plug already there for the LTC, so it's just a simple case of plugging it in. Now the LTC unit gives onboard wideband data straight into M1 Tune, so we can use this for really quickly tuning the fuel table. We can use the quick Lambda function and all we need to do is drive the engine into each zone in the fuel map, press the Q key, and the ECU will automatically tune the fuel cell to match the target Lambda table. And I found that really powerful and really quick. We could tune the whole fuel table in a matter of just minutes by using that Q function. If you've got the LTC fitted, the other thing you can do is use it for data logging. So we can data log what the air fuel ratio or Lambda was actually doing on the road or track. And another function that I used, which I found really powerful and really impressive, was the closed loop Lambda function. So this allows the ECU to use the LTC input and automatically tune the fuel table to achieve your target Lambda numbers. So if there's any discrepancy, the ECU will just fix it. And I found that this tracks so well, I actually left the wideband Lambda control on for the entire fuel map. So it just works perfectly, and made sure that day to day the Lambda was exactly where I wanted. Another function I really liked in the M150 is the closed loop knock control. Now the closed loop knock control takes the input from the two factory knock sensors, runs that through a digital signal processor, and it allows you to really accurately pinpoint knock or detonation. You can set up a threshold table of knock versus engine RPM, and if the knock signal exceeds that threshold at any time, the ECU will automatically retard the ignition timing on only the cylinder that's knocking. So it's great for peace of mind that if you get a bad batch of fuel or something goes wrong, your engine is going to be protected, and I found it to be really effective. Because we already had a MoTeC CDL3 dash unit in the car and the MoTeC SLM or shift light module, the integration with the M150 was really nice. Everything talks via CAN, and I actually used the knock control function to output to the shift light module and flash a red warning light if the engine encountered detonation. So this was a really nice way of just being able to give the driver a visual indication of knock or detonation occurring. Gives you the chance to back off, otherwise you may not know it's happening. Once we got the car bolted to the dyno, we got a chance to see what the M150 could produce when we optimised the tune. It wasn't a huge surprise that the numbers we got were fairly close to what we were seeing with the ECU tune. Now that's because it doesn't really matter what ECU you're using. If you're giving the engine the same air fuel ratio, the same ignition timing and the same cam timing, unsurprisingly the results are going to be the same. I think we saw a maximum gain of around about 2 kilowatts at the wheels. The advantage though was how quickly we could complete the tune. The ability to tune everything live meant that we could make small changes to cam timing, to ignition timing, and see the results instantly. Now that's really going to pay dividends, particularly when you get onto a more sophisticated engine combination, perhaps with aggressive camshafts, turbochargers or superchargers. We can tune the entire map very quickly, and if you want to do a speed density tune on a reflash, that's a really time consuming process. The other thing that I would point out is with the engine completely tuned on the M150 on both the road and the dyno, the air fuel ratio control on it is really stable, probably the most stable I've seen on any aftermarket ECU, and that was really impressive. It just tracks the target air fuel ratio perfectly everywhere. Now we'll get on to some of the reasons why you would want to go with a more sophisticated ECU like the MoTeC M150, and that's really for some of the advanced functions that it offers. So I'm talking here about proper tunable traction control and launch control. It's really sophisticated. If you want to add a potentiometer, you can have driver control maps for both launch control and traction control, so you can adjust this on the fly to suit track conditions, maybe wet weather, dry weather and things like that. So these will take a lot of work to set up properly, but when they are set up, it will give immense control over a powerful Toyota 86 and gives the driver a lot more confidence to push hard on the road or the racetrack. The other function that's really handy for those more orientated towards motorsport is the gear change ignition cut and throttle blip downshift. So if you're thinking of fitting a sequential gearbox, that allows full clutchless gear shifts and you don't need to back off the throttle. Just pull the gear lever and the ECU will do everything for you. On the downshift, again, don't worry about touching the clutch, just hit the brakes, downshift, and the ECU will blip the throttle to match revs for the next gear. So these are some of the features that are basically impossible to replicate with systems based on the factory ECU. If you want to extend on the abilities of the M150, this is also pretty easy. There's a couple of options there. The optional loom comes with a 12-pin breakout connector, so you can add additional sensors in there. For our installation, we've added an oil pressure and a fuel pressure sensor. This is the same place you could add a gear position sensor or a strain gauge input if you're using a sequential gearbox. You can also interface the M150 with MoTeC's E888 for expansion for such aspects as individual cylinder exhaust gas temperature monitoring. So it makes it really easy to expand on the capabilities of the M150. While there aren't too many negatives I could really bring up about the M150, the only one I did notice is that I think there's still a little bit of potential for work on the fuel model, particularly if you're making changes to the port injection, direct injection mix. At that point, the air-fuel ratio doesn't quite track target properly and you actually need to go back and make some changes to the VE table. Now I've discussed this with MoTeC and they put it down to some fairly significant fluctuations in the fuel pressure that's being seen by the port injectors, and we've data logged this and it does back up what they're telling us. It doesn't really matter because not too many people are going to go and make dramatic changes to their PI/DI table after the engine's tuned. Basically, if you set this and forget it, the rest of the fuel model just works faultlessly. The other thing I noticed as a user quite familiar with MoTeC's older 100 series ECUs is the M1 currently feels quite locked down and not quite as flexible as the 100 series. And an example I'll give you there is the AIM Lambda table. Now I went to change the axis, the load axis of that from manifold pressure to throttle position. Now on the old 100 series, basically any table in the ECU can have any axis value assigned to it. In the M1 tune or M150, that's not quite as easy, and a lot of these parameters are locked down and you can only use the axes that MoTeC have provided. While there's not really too much of an issue, for those who are used to really changing things up in a 100 series, you might feel a little bit restricted in the M150 environment. So to wrap up, we've found that the M150 package for the 86 gives excellent control over what is quite a sophisticated engine, really stable air-fuel ratio control, and it tunes up very quickly. And the ability to do that live is great. Now, as I said in our first installment here, this ECU isn't going to be a solution for everyone. Most people are going to be more than happy with a reflash, but for those that are looking to build an extreme engine, make a lot of horsepower, or for those that are more orientated towards serious competition in motorsport, this ECU is a great option. Also, for those who are wanting to get the absolute most out of their engine and give really easy control and tunability, this ECU is an amazing option, and I'm really impressed with the results we've seen.
For online tuning courses, visit learntotune.com.